And now I've got with me as my guest, Hannah Reisman. Hannah, thank you so much for joining me today on my blog. And please, would you tell me a bit about
Not a problem.
yourself and your background?
Well, my name
Sweet.
is Hannah Reisman. I have loved animals my entire life. I've been involved with animals my entire life in various different ways. The reason I love animals is simple because it is so easy to communicate with an animal. I have difficulty, obviously, dealing or communicating with hearing people, but I seem to be able to communicate with animals. I come from a big family. My dad was sick quite often, and communication was a challenge there too. So dealing with communication challenges just seemed to be to deal with that. The best way was to focus on animals.
And regarding your background fostering and adopting animals, have you ever adopted or fostered a dog or cat from overseas or out of the country prior to Homer? And if so, please tell me about that. Tell me their story.
Okay, well, let's go back again to my family pet, my dog. Again, I love animals. This wasn't my dog, this was the family pet. And I can remember our very first dog. It was a black collie.
Nice.
His name was Laddie. I think my brother found this dog somehow. I really don't remember how he came into our family, but he brought this dog home. And I think of all the animals I've ever met, Laddie was the smartest by far. And I think the reason was he used to be really worried about cars, traffic. He seemed to know enough to look both ways. He just knew instinctively how to handle traffic. He was brilliant. He wore no collar, didn't need one. He saved my brother's life when my brother was a very small boy. Now, I think what happened, my mother was busy on the phone or something, and my brother was outside wandering around. And I think he went to, it was probably about half an hour. And he went onto a busy road, and there was a lot of traffic, and the dog followed my brother the whole time.
Wow.
There was somebody who had seen on a busy road, yep, Laddie, the dog, got in front of my brother and pushed him away so that he couldn't take a step onto the busy road. He
Incredible.
fell. He basically pushed him out of the way. Somebody ended up calling my mom. I don't really know how she ended up finding out, but she came and picked him up. And I tell you, that dog saved my brother's life, kept him out of traffic. He, honestly, the smartest animal ever. I've had a lot of animals. I've had my own dogs of various breeds. I've had an Irish setter who was an absolutely beautiful dog, but I'm sorry, dumb and wild. And then what other animals did I have? Oh, I had a smaller collie. Trying to remember the breed. It was a Shetland collie.
Right.
It was a mixed breed. I've had a variety of mixed breeds too. But then for a few years, I had no dog at all. I was so concerned about it running away or getting hit by a car because it was just too much to control at the time. And I was busy, frankly, with horses at the time. I was crazy for horses.
Cool.
Um, I also had a Great Pyrenees at one point, the big white dog. He was champ, I'll tell you. Wow,
Mhm.
I absolutely loved him. At that point in my life, I got married. My husband and I talked about wanting a dog. And I believe at that time, was probably 82, 83, where we were talking about what kind of dog we wanted. And we wanted something different. We were thinking about a Shar Pei.
Oh,
We'd
yes.
seen the breed and we're very curious about it. So that's pretty much where the interest in Shar Peis came from. We did get a puppy that came from California. And
Okay.
let me tell you, it was very hard to find a Shar Pei back in 1982, 83.
Oh,
We
yeah.
had to be put on a waiting list. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this puppy was from California. That one unfortunately passed away. So we got another one looking for another one of the same breed. I think I'd learned through Facebook somewhere that there were rescue dogs because I really didn't know anything about rescue dogs at that point in my life. I decided at that point that from then on, I would look towards getting a shelter dog or a rescue dog. And I did find a Shar Pei. I tell you, I learned a lot. I learned an awful lot from these dogs and the influence they've had on my life. The first one died of cancer, and I tell you, I grieved for a long time. And I tell you, that first one was probably one of the most loyal animals I've ever had. Even though if I was sitting on the computer, the dog would be sitting there, right there. If any man even came near me, he would start to growl, and I'd have to say it's okay. And as soon as I said it's okay, he'd listen. He'd be fine. He listened to me and attended the very moment I'd say anything to him. If I called him, he'd immediately stop wherever if he was running, he'd stop in his tracks. He listened to every single thing. He had a very bad life, though, unfortunately, and I it's because he was caged for a great deal of the time, like almost 23 hours a day. He was only out for an hour to pee, to get water, and that was it. And I'm pretty sure he was in that situation for 5 years. And I just decided I couldn't take that anymore. It didn't matter what kind of history or whatever that dog had, I had to take it out of that environment. When I brought him in the house, oh, I just thought the best thing to do was to leave it alone and let him come to me. And it took time, but I'm telling you, that dog became my best friend. But as I said, we fought, but unfortunately, he succumbed to cancer. He had a sarcoma, and that was it. There was really no cure. If he had a lymphoma, perhaps there might have been a chance. We could have extended his life, but with a sarcoma, forget it. There was no choice. So that's what happened there. That was Della.
Ellen.
And then I think that was the third one. So we're on to the fourth now, which was another rescue. I found it actually from a contact in Canada. Somebody from the States had brought it to Canada as a rescue.
Mm.
And I said I wanted a rescue dog and asked what they had. They showed me pictures of a variety of dogs. And I almost took another one. But this dog that I was looking at apparently didn't like to be picked up and put in the car. And I, excuse me, when it came to the Shar Pei, I didn't really don't care. I just had to accept it for what it was. So I took that dog at this Maggie, Maggi. Sorry, interpreter correction. Yeah, and Maggie, let me tell you, was the friendliest dog you'd ever want to meet. And one thing, oh my goodness, when it came to squirrels and Maggie, oh my, she would absolutely get out of control. I would have to train her. She did improve a little bit, but she would sit at the door and cry. She would be, if she was in the back of my car and saw a squirrel, she'd be all over the back seat. She would just want to grab that squirrel and have it as a toy.
Mm.
Uh, if I can just go back a bit to Della, I
Yeah.
learned so much from that dog. She had Shar Pei fever, and that was not something I was familiar with at all. I learned a lot about that through that dog. So knowing that when it came to Maggie, oh wow, she suffered from that quite often. She had Shar Pei fever, I would say probably every 3-4 months. And Maggie, when I think about it, looks very much like Homer. Like big time
Oh,
looks like Homer. Yeah. Yeah. And a very good dog. But I figured one dog was enough. But then I saw on Facebook a rescue, and I've tried to donate many, many times. I never stop. Even to this day, I still donate to the cause.
yeah.
But I remember seeing that there was one that no one was taking, and that was one named Waldo. Waldo was from Kentucky in the States, and there were plans to put him to sleep, and I grieved over that, and I wanted to do something about it. So Canada Rescue was willing to help me, and we did manage to get Waldo out, and we got Waldo to the vet, and he had mange like you wouldn't believe. Like he couldn't even come into Canada, or sorry, I couldn't have him home for some time until they could deal with the mange first.
Mhm.
Um, it was just the right timing. I had moved into this condo, I think probably 2 days, and 2 days later I picked up Waldo.
Wow.
Yeah, he started off, as I said, in Kentucky. He had mange in Kentucky. They had to deal with it in Kentucky before we could get him into Canada. And he was on like a leg by leg by leg ride to get from Kentucky to
Okay.
here. Somebody would drive so far, somebody else would pick him up and drive so far, and finally got him into Canada. And it probably took about 3, 4 days because obviously the driver had to sleep and whatnot, but it was successful. I did finally get to meet Waldo. He was so paper thin. Oh my goodness, I couldn't believe it. When I opened the door and looked at him, I tell you, he was so thin. He was emaciated, and he had one eye that was really swollen, and it looked wrong. Like he could not see out of his right eye at all. So I tried to get him out of the car, got him out, got him into my car. He was a little nervous, and I just hoped that he would get along with Maggie because I had Maggie at home. And I'll never forget, we were in the elevator coming up to my apartment, and Waldo's eyes opened up and he started checking out his environment like he was curious, like, what's going on? What is this? So this was, after about 2, 3 times of getting used to coming into the apartment, it was old hat to him. When I first brought him in, I made sure that I held his leash when I opened the door. And as I said before, their backgrounds are irrelevant to me. Whatever they come in with, we can work on. So I brought Waldo in, and there was no problem. Maggie was the boss, and Waldo knew it.
Mhm.
He was very submissive, which worked out perfectly for all of us. That made me very happy. They were some of the best years that the two of them had together because they were inseparable. They were absolutely best friends. Both of them were very, very intelligent too. I remember Maggie loved bones. She'd always keep herself busy. Always, always. She'd spend 2 hours on a bone. Whereas Waldo would end up taking naps, but he'd always nap right there with Maggie by his side. He just wanted to be with her. And somehow, Waldo saw that the bone was Maggie's favorite. And at one point, grabbed it, put it in his mouth. Maggie went right up to him, looked him in the eye. He walked around her, and Maggie started barking and barking and barking and barking. And I just sat and waited while Waldo chewed a little bit on the bone. And then when he looked up at me, it was like Maggie knew that Waldo couldn't see out of that bad eye. And as soon as he looked around and he could see out of his good eye, she took her bone back.
Huh.
And that's fine. That was her bone. She wanted it back, but she found a nice way to take it back. I think it was probably maybe a week later, Maggie stole Waldo's bone.
Mhm.
And guess what?
Uh,
Waldo copied Maggie's behavior. He walked around and started barking at her.
Uh-huh.
And I watched that in fascination. So he was learning from her, definitely.
Mhm.
And Waldo, regarding squirrels, like he was never really a squirrel dog. I don't think he was crazy over squirrels. But it was so funny that when Waldo saw a squirrel, he would look at Maggie and look to her reaction because he knew she loved squirrels. So how interesting is that? And then
Yeah.
Maggie would be like, what? So, and I'd have to tell Maggie, or sorry, tell Waldo no, because he'd get all excited and they'd jump around the back seat. But I'm telling you, the two of them were absolutely the best of friends.
Aw.
Waldo would do anything for Maggie, anything at all. I remember one time I was sleeping. I don't remember what actually happened, but oh, sorry, Waldo was sleeping on the floor, I guess, and I didn't feel anything, but Maggie would always come right into my face basically and bark to get my attention. She woke me up. I think she figured she needed to go to the bathroom. So I'm like, come on, let's go. And there, I'm trying to get Waldo to go too, and Waldo was shaking. I thought, what in the world? Ah, Shar-Pei fever. That's what it was. Waldo ended up with a case of Shar-Pei fever. As soon as Maggie knew that I knew Waldo was sick, she went lay back down and went back to sleep. I'll never forget that. She woke me to let me know that Waldo was sick.
Hmm.
Like they, as I said, they had a great life. We used to go out all the time. We used to, I have great many memories. Unfortunately, Maggie passed away. She had kidney failure. Maggie passed away. Yes. The vet wanted, the vet said I had to bring Waldo to the vet because he needed to know what happened to Maggie. If he didn't go and see that,
Yeah.
Waldo would be looking for her forever, and we did not want that to happen. Waldo was absolutely the most polite, respectful dog you ever wanted to know if I was sick or whatever. I needed to be left alone. He just knew to leave me alone. If I needed his attention, he knew. He's the most probably polite animal I've ever met. He never complained about anything. But then when Maggie passed, I told Waldo, that Maggie was my dog too, and that I would grieve and all of that. And I thought that he would grieve a lot too, but all he really did was stay close to me. And I guess a week, 2 weeks later, I realized that he loved her. He absolutely adored her, and their friendship was probably the best I've ever seen. 2 or 3 years later, I found Homer through Facebook.
Yes.
Now, I was watching the Facebook page and seeing some of the awful conditions that some of these dogs were experiencing. This particular dog was from Serbia.
Serbia.
And I was watching and I saw that somebody had taken it and was taking care of it. And I thought, great, but I kept watching the site, hoping that somebody had found a good home for it. And unfortunately, a year later, I guess people had given up on him. So I decided I wasn't going to give up on him and I brought him home. I did, though, need some help. I didn't know how to get him home. I was very fortunate that somehow the woman from Serbia knew somebody who lived in Toronto
Great.
who was a rescuer and had brought dogs here before and had a lot of experience with that. So I thought that was perfect. The woman's name was Jana. So I managed to get a hold of Jana. I told her I needed her help, and she said absolutely. She rolled up her sleeves and got right to it. Now, obviously, it took a while to finally get it to happen, probably 3, 4 months.
Yeah.
So, we had a long way to go. But when I saw Homer on Facebook, he couldn't walk. He was lying down. Somebody must have basically thrown him in the garbage, and someone had found him in a garbage dumpster and brought him in. He needed surgery on his elbow, on his eyes, and everything. But
Yes.
once he had surgeries, he was able to walk. I was hoping that he'd find a good home, as I said, but No, I just decided no. It there enough time had gone by. He needed a new home. He needed a good home, and he needed attention. So again, 3, 4 months later, as I said, it took some time, but oh, he looked so much better. There was another small dog that came with him. They came together. And of course, I was very excited to meet him at the airport. He was nervous, excited. So I met Jana at the airport with the dog. She brought the cage, and oh my goodness, I started crying. I was so happy. She brought him out of the cage. I should back up. I should have been actually fostering Homer
Right.
to find him a good home
Mhm.
because there was somebody in Washington, D.C. was looking for a Shar Pei, and ultimately that's where the dog was going to go. But they changed their mind,
Mhm.
and I decided that I would keep him. So anyway, I got the dog at the airport, brought him home. Again, I was nervous because I knew that he was going to have to meet Waldo. Yeah, because Waldo was here at home, so I was hoping that him and Homer would get along, but they did. Now I should apologize and back up again.
Mhm.
I had fostered another dog before I got Homer. It was a a Charmin that was 14 years old
Oh,
from Toronto.
wow.
Yeah, the owner had passed away and nobody was able to take the dog.
Huh.
So I was getting accused of never fostering a dog before. I was saying that I live in a condo. I got to be really careful about how I do that. So I just decided, okay, I was going to take that dog. Let me tell you, that was not easy. This dog bit. Oh my
Ooh.
goodness. Yeah, you had to be really careful around this dog, kind of back off. So I had to explain that. And I guess about 3 days later, Homer's health was improving. I was feeding him better. He was getting fed better. I was giving him a lot of help. I was helping him get up.
Mhm.
Now I knew I was a little bit anxious and nervous that, something might happen. He might try to bite me or something, but no, that never happened. I was worried for Waldo too, because every time Waldo had to go to the bathroom and I'd open the door, the other one would start growling, would make
Oh,
Waldo shy away. So I would have to tell the other one, no, don't do that, not stop barking, stop growling. So because Waldo got very submissive and like afraid and would take off.
hmm.
But um, I guess one of my biggest mistakes was I was planning to go shopping to Holt Renfrew one time. And up until that point, I had always taken the dog, but I only ever had one, and I figured I could handle it. I wasn't worried about Waldo, but I had to be careful about the other because I was buying makeup and all this other kind of stuff. I figured if I could just zip in, leave the dog in the car, zip in, zip home, and it wouldn't be a problem. And somehow, okay, so I left the dogs outside. I was in the store buying my makeup. I had my bags, and the dog, I guess every time the dog sees another small dog, it would growl. So that was just its thing, right? Every time. So this dog didn't see very well, as I said, 14 years old, and there was a small child running on the sidewalk, and the dog thought it was another dog and bit the child.
Uh,
I'm screaming, no, no, no. And thankfully, the dog let go. Thank God, because the dog thought this running child was another dog. Let me tell you what an awful experience that was. So I was nervous, and I just said, let me take the dog home. and I will take full responsibility for the dog's action.
Mm.
I made sure I found out where they live. They know where I live. So I dropped them at home. I called rescue because, again, this was a foster. This was not technically my dog at the
Right.
time. We needed information about vaccination dates and all of that kind of stuff. So I got that and provided it. And then they had to come here and pick the dog up. And I'm sorry, but there's no reason to be mad at me. I think at the same time, there's reason to be happy because I live in a condo. There are a few kids around, and thankfully nothing has ever happened here. So I have to be very, very careful. So anyway, I decided I couldn't do that and go back to that store again. But I was happy that that dog had a good life, but uh, not something I'd want to do again.
Yeah.
I think now my biggest lesson is that people who live in condos really do have to be careful about what kind of dog they have. It has to be friendly. If
Yeah.
the dog lives in a house, it's a completely different environment. I learned my lesson by living in a condo and having dogs. So Homer had to be a friendly dog. There was absolutely no option. So that's all there was to it, and he certainly was.
Yeah.
Um, I did go through hell with Homer. I shouldn't say hell, but
It was hard.
he had problems with his eyes. Um, at one time I had to go to New York and I took the dogs with me because one of them specifically needed a Shar-Pei specialist.
Mhm.
This was Dr. Linda T. Oh, Tingle, Tingle. She was a specialist and has been for 40 years. So this was totally her field. And I know her, absolutely adore her. So I brought Homer to her to get her to fix his eyes. That the day of the surgery, he spent a long time looking at me because up until that point he couldn't see very well. And obviously after the surgery he was still sore, but you could tell he was happy that that problem was resolved. He was healthy and we managed to get back home. And I think might have been 2, maybe 3 months later, he got sick. Oh, and that was terrible. Um, I'm trying to remember the name of what it was, but it was horrible. He did almost die. It starts with an S. Strep, staphylococcus. Anyway, it was a terrible, terrible experience. At first, I didn't even know what that was. He had purple things and pimples all over his body. And what in the world is that?
Mm.
I took a picture of it and I sent that to Dr. Tingle. And she responded immediately and said, "Get to the vet." I was terrified. I brought him to the vet and they didn't even know what that was. And I said, "Please, please tell Dr. Tingle, talk to her, connect with her," because they didn't know what to do. So they ended up taking Homer to the ICU. I was there with him every day. He fought like you wouldn't believe for like 2 months, but he did make it through. And he was fine after that for a while. But again, I was a little scared. And he had a problem with his elbow and he needed surgery, but I kept putting that off. From the Serbian doctor, like they had done something. They were
Mm.
trying to fix his elbow, but instead of fixing one side, they dealt with the other side and they just made matters worse for him. So I kept putting that off. And then I finally decided it was time to get that operated on too. And I was very, very nervous, but he made it. He was fine afterwards. Like he was sick and vomiting for a while afterwards, but he did make it through. And his left leg, or sorry, his one leg that was operated on was much, much better. He did have sharp A fever for a while there, but not very often. So knock on wood that he didn't have it too terribly often. Yeah, I couldn't be more happy about that. He managed to get the right combination of medicine, of vitamins, and working with his diet.
Mhm.
And right now, he's going along fine. He's not a difficult dog by any means. Like you just have health issues to take care of. He's relatively easy to lift if I have to. I can get him into the car, get him into bed. I do have the steps for dogs so that he's got access where he needs it. When I was younger, it was a lot easier for me to pick up a big dog, but the older I get, the more difficult it is for me. So I have found other ways to accommodate, and we haven't had a problem at all.
Oh, wow.
Going down, coming out, or going downstairs, I can carry him. That's not a big deal. I
Mhm.
think the disability he has, if you will, it is not a barrier to him at all. He's perfectly fine, and I won't let his disability be a barrier to us in any way. Like if we want to go for a long walk, then I take a stroller. Like we're not doing things just because he has a difficult time walking. He's usually tired after a good 45-minute walk anyway. And you can tell by the way he walks that he's tired. But I think it was when last year, I can't remember. He had a bad anxiety attack. And oh my goodness, it was probably the worst thing of anything we've ever had to deal with.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, it was awful to go through. It was very frustrating because I couldn't communicate with him. He couldn't understand me, and I couldn't understand what was going on with him. I started out with herbal remedies with a doctor who was good in that. That stuff didn't really seem to help. I just ended up wanting to give up. But then I saw a behavior specialist, particularly a dog behavior specialist. And I thought, well, I'm not so keen on this, but I did go through the interview with them. I did put him on some medication. We did try some stuff, and he was kind of on a roller coaster in terms of his health until this behavior therapist told me that the dog was suffering. He was in pain. That's probably why he wasn't walking right and all that stuff, and he just kept getting progressively worse. So although I was afraid to give him medication, I was convinced it was necessary. I gave him Prozac, and he's on this other medication as well. And I probably didn't see any kind of improvement until 6 weeks later. But after about the first 4 weeks, I saw a bit of an improvement. And over the course of time, I saw him getting happier and happier, which makes it happier for both of us.
Mhm.
We really did work together on this. And when his anxiety hits, it's terrible. He crashes. He crashed about 3 weeks ago, and it took probably 2 weeks to get him out of it. It was awful. So the doctor suggested that I increase his medication dose by 10 milligrams and then add another pill. And I just thought, oh, I know I don't like pills, but okay.
Mhm.
Plus, he's also on another medication that helps him calm down. I'm trying to remember the name. It's like clozidine, something like that. But that stuff worked like a charm. He'd take that medication and he'd get a good sleep afterwards. And when I looked at him, I think his quality of life, like I don't want to be selfish. I didn't want to give him medication up right up until that time because I was concerned about what it was going to do to him.
Mhm.
But when the doctor told me that this was going to help him and it was going to make him better, it really doesn't matter how the medication affects him physically. It's about his quality of life. And if it helps improve his quality of life, then it's worth making that choice, surgery.
Right.
Now, to wrap up,
Mhm.
Della, as I said, taught me a lot about the breed and all of that stuff. This breed needs a good home. If it's a rescue, they need help. I have a picture of Della right here, and that she always reminds me to be diligent. I have talked I find that Homer it takes a lot of attention. Waldo didn't need so much attention. He was a lot easier to manage. It really depends not just on the breed, but on the situation you bring the dog into and how much energy you have to put into that relationship. Like if I were to move to a house, that'd be great, but that's not my plan right now for several reasons. Here, would I recommend things to consider about adopting a Shar Pei or a pet? Would
Yes.
you recommend that for someone looking at adopting overseas? Absolutely, yes, definitely. You have to go through the rescue network if you're going to do that. I think the big thing is commitment.
Okay.
You must be committed to the survival of the animal. You must be accepting unconditionally. Doesn't matter what that animal presents with, you deal with it. Just like you would do as a parent with your children. I used to, my mother always used to say, oh, I'm sorry, I used to say to my mother all the time how blessed I felt. And she said, why? And I said, because I'm deaf. You could very well have thrown me out.
Oh.
Like, really, could have thrown me away. My parents were champ.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah, they taught me what unconditional love means. That's where I learned it from.
oh, that's fantastic. Yeah,
And again, just because I may be perceived as having a disability, it doesn't stop me by any means either.
exactly.
Let me tell you a little story just before we close.
No
When
problem.
I'm watching the news and there's an audience and they think that an interpreter is necessary, but only for special situations.
Yeah,
You know what? Hearing people need a special thing for situations too, and that's a microphone. And they always need it.
yeah,
So you know what? I always need an interpreter, not just for special occasions.
right.
So you got to take that perspective and apply it to my view. You know, I think mutual respect is so very important in this world. When you consider somebody being labeled disabled and then having all the barriers that come with it, there is no easy part to that.
Yes, absolutely.
And thank you very much to the interpreter,
Yes,
Glenda.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Glenda. Thank you so much. Thank you, Glenda. Thank you, Hannah. I can't wait to see Homer again and give him the massage work. You know, I love seeing him. Thank you. Thank you so much, Hannah. It was terrific.
Oh, not a problem.